Argentina's economy grew more than expected in the first 3 months of the year, as spending, consumption and financial services rebounded. But energy imbalances and inflation concerns are causing some investors to be more cautious. Joining me on the phone to discuss his perspective is Harish Natarajan. Now, Harish, Argentine inflation is a constant challenge. Press reports say real inflation is around 25%, which is more than double the figure given by official sources. To help combat the problem, retailers in the country agreed to freeze prices this year for a period of time. But how do you see this situation playing out?
Right. So I think it's important to note that the Argentinian government seems to wantingly deny the problem. This has been shown on several levels. They've been, as you said and pointed out, they have manipulated economic statistics. They've already been sanctioned and censored by the International Monetary Fund for doing so. And at the same time, they've also tried, but ultimately failed to prevent other institutions from reporting economic data. One of the reasons I think all of that's important is the government has been trying to deny the problem, which is one of the reasons why I think they have been manipulating figures. So it's very interesting to try and understand what will then happen overall. And I think what's probably likely to occur is there's going to be mounting problems which create more and more issues for the Argentinian economy. For instance, they've already put price controls and price freezes in place. But at the same time, those companies and those retail outlets who have to abide by those price controls are seeing their costs increase all the time, in particular their labor costs. What's probably going to happen is they're going to have to cut workers, for instance, and cut output. You'll also see more and more shortages, and these problems will just increase over time. It's unclear what the government will then be able to do about it. But I think at some point they'll need to react, probably by increasing interest rates massively, probably by decreasing spending massively, though I suspect this will probably be left up to the next government rather than this one to deal with the reality of the situation.
According to some Buenos Aires analysts, if the Argentine government does not manage to stabilise its energy balance, which is one of the main drains of US dollars, the ban on hard currency purchases, the barriers to imports and the growing obstacles to spend money overseas for Argentine travellers will continue and could worsen. But what do you think?
I think certainly one of the major problems Argentina faces is that they have chronic shortages domestically of energy and need to import more and more of it. This might not have been the case 10 years ago, but it's certainly the case now, and is obviously one of the major reasons that they are short on US dollars. But I think there's a couple of things to note. The first is that is not the only reason why the economy is suffering and struggling with dollar shortages. For instance, if you look at other sectors of the Argentinian economy, many are suffering because of lack of competitiveness. That links back to high levels of inflation while trying to maintain a fixed exchange rate with the US dollar, which is harming many Argentinian export markets overall, even, for instance, some of those traditional strong sectors, partly manufacturing, partly agricultural. So it's obviously important that Argentina tries to deal with the energy deficit, but there are multiple other problems which we'll also try and face. Maybe one positive we can get out of this is that Argentina does seem to be moving to do something about the energy deficit. They look, for instance, to be trying to exploit their reserves of shale gas, but that solution is probably still at least 5 or 10 years away. And in the meantime, you have mounting problems, and the energy deficit is certainly one of them, and will create problems and probably mean that currency controls will have to stay in place for the foreseeable future.
Strict capital controls that limit the amount of foreign currency Argentines can purchase legally have fueled a parallel illegal market for dollars, where residents pay a steep premium for the US currency. What sort of impact are these underground currency markets having on the economy in general, and what is your outlook for the peso moving forward?
So I think of the underground economy creating the so-called blue peso, which is the illicit peso, being more of a symptom than a cause of the most of Argentina's problems. So I don't think its existence per se has huge negative consequences on the economy, except maybe increasing demand for Argentinian pesos at the official rate. But I think that's a fairly marginal problem overall. I think maybe the larger problem with it is still that you have a fixed exchange rate, which Argentina are unwilling and to some degree unable to let go of, which is the cause of both the illicit market for pesos and at the same and of many of Argentina's problems, like, for instance, their capital controls. So I think of the 6 to 12 months, we're talking about at most a very moderate devaluation or depreciation, because I don't think the government will be allowing it to, will be allowing the legal currency to change value a great deal. It's much harder to predict what's going to happen with the shadow rating, in other words, the underground rating, which is currently hovering about 8 to 9 pesos per US dollar. That will probably over time increase slightly. Over the next 6 months, you might be looking at it hitting 10 as it has previously. But I think the normal peso or the official peso US dollar exchange rate will stay more or less constant, at least for the next 6 to 12 months, because the government will be unwilling to allow it to move.
Harish, thank you so much for chatting to us today. Well, that's all from me for just now, but later I'll be bringing an economic update on Greece, so please do click back for that. Goodbye for now.